Hello friends! Welcome back to Health Highlights, where I spend the time learning about all things health and bring you the highlights. In the podcast titled The Bitter Truth About Sugar and How It's Destroying Your Health with Dr. Robert Lustig and Drew Pruitt, whole grains and how unhealthy they are was discussed. Here's why. Whole grain bread. Is it whole grain? It says it is on the label. What is the definition of whole grain? There is none. That is the problem. The outside of the grain, the husk or the kernel, it is all fiber. The inside has two parts, the starchy endosperm, where you get flour from, and the germ, which is where all the good stuff is, like nucleic acid, polyphenols, and flavonoids. The husk, if it stays intact, is the whole grain. The enzymes in your intestines have to strip the husk off to get to the good stuff. We don't have enzymes that work very well for that, so it takes a long time before you can actually get what is inside liberated. So by the time it does get liberated, it is further down your intestine where your gut microbes can feast on them. That is why whole grains are good. It is a delivery system for getting the food further down your intestine to feed your bacteria. Whole grain bread in the supermarket is not whole grain because the grains have been pulverized. That process liberated the flour and the nucleic acids and polyphenols and all that good stuff. They are still there, but they will go rancid now that they have been liberated. As whole grains, they can be stored for months at a time. As soon as you pulverize them, now they are on the clock. They will go rancid. One reason food goes rancid is because of the liberation of proteins and nucleic acids, which taste terrible if they are oxidized. The food industry will pulverize the whole grain and sift off the nucleic acid or the germ part of the whole grain and leave you with the powder that still has some fiber, but not much, and it's not surrounding the starchy endosperm. Now you consume it, and you can't set up that gel, so the starches are immediately acted on by the saliva and the stomach acid, and they start breaking up, and you liberate all of the glucose that goes via the portal vein to the liver and generates an insulin spike. And now, you are off to the races in terms of chronic metabolic disease. Because the food industry started with whole grain, they are allowed to say it is whole grain, but it's not. What is whole grain bread? What does it look like? Can you buy it in the store? The answer is yes, but not at Safeway. You can buy it at Whole Foods or at a specialty store that costs more. A 1 pound loaf is half the size of a regular loaf, and it is dense. You can tell whether or not it is whole grain by how hard it hits your head if it's thrown at you. If it would knock you out, then it's whole grain. If it would bounce off your head, it is not whole grain. Whole grain bread makes a lousy sandwich because it doesn't have a lot of gluten liberated, so it doesn't hold together as spongy as commercial bread. That's why we don't make kid sandwiches for school out of whole grain bread, because the bread tends to fall apart. That is true whole grain bread. You can buy it, but you can't make a sandwich out of it. Just because the label says it is whole grain doesn't mean it is. If you're going to eat whole grain bread, make sure it is super dense. Otherwise, skip it. Thank you for coming along on our health journey together. Let me know in the comments where you have been able to find whole grain bread. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss any health highlights. Until next time, here's to health.